All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Unbiased America Live. We are having our debate show today. We have a guest, Omar Rivero from Occupy Democrats, that is here. Later, we'll have Robert Gibson from US Uncut, hopefully, if we can figure out his tech issue. We also have our regular panel. We want to welcome back Michael Lee with his really nice beard. He finally decided to show up again. Did you make it out of whatever situation you were in there? Was it with the cops? You went to jail for a little while?
Went to jail. Also
Okay,
had to flee the country for a little while. Sought
right.
asylum in Russia. That was pretty cool.
Oh, okay, yeah. Maybe you shouldn't, divulge classified information. Um,
Right.
we also have Grant Phillips of the Modern Libertarian and We Are Capitalists. Of course, Kevin Ryan in his humble abode with the fireplace in the background and the candles. Um, the purveyor of Unbiased America. We have Matt Palumbo of Being Classically Liberal and every other page that you can mention, Unbiased America as well. And of course me, Will Riccadella of Unbiased America. Omar, in the meantime, since Carl isn't here yet, and we'll introduce him when he comes on, you are one of two purveyors of the Occupy Democrats Facebook page, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and when did you start Occupy Democrats?
I founded it in, I believe it was September of 2012.
Okay, so you started, and when did you realize or start to realize its takeoff? I mean, it has a ton of followers. When did that start to culminate?
Uh, Honestly, on the first day, I got like 800 likes, and I turned around, and I remember my older brother was there. We were out on the balcony, and I told him this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
So day one, you started a Facebook fan page, Occupy Democrats, and without doing
Uh,
anything, you got 800 likes.
Well, kind of. I had been very active on Facebook for about 6 years before that, under just my personal account, my personal
Hmm.
name, Omar Rivero. So one day I did my MBA in Europe, and one of my friends from my MBA program, an Italian student, he sent me a Facebook message saying, "Hey Omar, I'm about to block you on Facebook. I'm tired of hearing about Obama this and Republicans this. I want to be able to keep in touch with you, and I don't have your cell phone number, so here's a link to create a page. Stop annoying the rest of us that just want to enjoy Facebook." So I clicked on it, and I saw how easy it was to start a page, and I came to the part where it asked me to come up with a name. And I remembered about a year and a half ago, when I had spent 2 years in Europe during my MBA program, then I went to Colombia to work in finance. And then when I came back, I skipped Miami. I live in Miami, and I skipped Miami, and I paid extra to go to New York, and I went to Zuccotti Park because I was very excited about the Occupy Wall Street movement. I had been following it from England.
Hmm.
Well, before that, I had been following the Tea Party, which was pretty worrisome. And then I saw Occupy Wall Street, and I thought, hey, maybe this is the left's response to the Tea Party movement. I went to Zuccotti Park. I met a lot of people that I agreed with, a lot of people that I disagreed with. There was Tea Partiers there. There was people from the far left, the far right. I'm more of a center left kind of guy, so I didn't exactly agree with everybody. And I spoke to some of the folks about what they were planning on doing in terms of politics, if what policies they agreed with, how they thought they were going to occupy Washington D.C. and actually get some of these policies enacted. There was a lot of Tea Party congressmen at the time, and I said, "Hey, are you guys thinking of having any Occupy congressmen?" And they looked at me like I was crazy, and they said, "Hey, we don't support the two-party system, etc." So I went back home a little bit disappointed, and I thought to myself, well, there should be some sort of a section of their movement that accommodates folks who like the Democratic Party as well.
Right. I'd
Um,
like I'd like to get the number of that guy who told you to stop posting your stuff to your personal page and to create another page, because now that page is ticking me off. So seriously, I'd like to have a chat with that guy. But no, that's
yeah.
that's an interesting story. I mean, how many followers do you have now?
I think we just passed 1.2 million today.
Oh
Uh,
wow. And you've
yeah.
parlayed this into a business?
We take in money from the website has advertising revenue. We get probably about 7 million hits on our website a month, but we
Wow.
get we get about maybe 500 million hits on our Facebook page every month. So
Okay.
we're mostly a Facebook page, but of course, I graduated college $80,000 in debt. So I needed to pay that money back. I needed to put food on the table. So we monetized the website. It doesn't make a lot of money, but it makes enough for us to be self-sustaining and keep growing.
Clearly not enough to have a house like Kevin, that's for sure. Look at that thing. Got a foyer and the French doors in the background next to his crackling fireplace. You know what I mean?
I don't want to turn around. Does it need to be stoked, the fire?
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I actually just moved in. This is my new place. That's why there's very little furniture, and I just moved in like 3 days ago. But we do have a fireplace.
Oh,
so
very nice.
He's got competition.
This is my old place. I moved here 10 years ago, and I still don't have furniture. So, I kind of want to start on some topics, even though Carl's not here, but I don't want you to be ganged up on at the same time. But I do want to have somewhat of a lively debate at the same time. And we do know that last week, guns is in the news again. That's all anybody's talking about. We had that horrible shooting in Oregon, another loon job with a gun going into another campus. I want to start with you, Omar. What can be done about this problem? Is it really a mental health problem, or is the issue guns? And is there anything the government can do about it? Is this really an issue for the government?
Well, when we talk about guns, in a country that has over almost 300 million people and probably just the same amount of guns or even more if you count collectors and novelty guns, it's a little bit late.
Thank y'all so much. I appreciate this.
Oh, here comes Carl. He just warms in on the scene here. Sorry, Omar.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Carl. We're on air.
Robert.
All right. Well, that was a headache, but I think we got that figured out.
All right, cool. We're on air, Carl. Or Robert. How about whatever? Well, I just asked Omar about guns, so he's gonna. I asked him about is there anything the government can do to stem the problem of the Oregon shooting? Is there a single law that you can enact that would stop such such things? I'm sorry, Omar. Go ahead.
I mean, so obviously there's too many guns in our country. I mean, there's way too many guns to ban them. That just doesn't make any sense. We obviously have mental health issues in our country. I mean, Reagan basically cut off all funding for mental health institutions in the 80s.
Wasn't that because of civil rights problems? I don't know if that was something necessarily that was political. I think people said their civil rights were being violated.
Yeah, I mean, there's several reasons for it, but we don't. The point is, we have very inadequate funding for mental health services in this country. We actually do have a higher rate of mental disease in this country than they do in other countries, in Scandinavian, European countries. So of course that's an issue as well. If there's one law that the government can do to help stem gun violence, I don't think there is such a law. Of course, we have universal background checks that were filibustered in the Senate 2 years ago.
So we don't have them now. To be clear, we don't have universal background checks now.
No, not on all kinds of gun purchases. On some, but not on all. Not on a federal blanket level.
Okay.
So I don't think that there's any one law that can
that's
be.
Fair.
Also, Republicans in the early 90s, I believe, they also banned the Center for Disease Control from doing research on gun deaths and gun violence. So we don't even have good statistics about it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing is just one big mess. And then you have the NRA, which owns both parties. I mean, namely Republicans. They spend a lot of money legally bribing Congress to, ignore the gun issue and ignore all the blood being spilled on our streets.
Okay, so let me summarize. So there's too many guns, and they don't have a federal universal background check. Is essentially the problem. So the remedy is to get rid of all the guns. Is that a stretch in saying?
No, absolutely not. There's no way to get rid of all the guns in this country. We already went down that rabbit hole 100 years ago.
So there's nothing we could do.
No, I mean, there's things that we could do to help stem gun violence, but to get rid of all gun violence, it's impossible. You can't get rid of all knife violence. You can't get rid of any.
Before I go to Omar, is there one tangible thing other than the universal background checks that we can do to stem gun violence?
There's one thing, it might be banning some sort of semi-automatic handguns, but there's different definitions of what qualifies as a handgun. You could limit ammunition clips. There's things you could do here and there, but they're not going to stop somebody from going in. You can get a car and drive it into 100 people. And
It's
kill
like
them.
a deeper cultural issue. I mean, guns are part of the problem, but I mean, it's kind of like a reflection of our culture as well. The reason we have so many mass shootings. I didn't mean to step in and interrupt anybody.
No,
Is that
go
all
ahead.
right?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just
mean,
wanted to just let me summarize what it was there. It was banning semi-automatic guns and limiting the clip size would help stem, to Omar's point, would help stem gun violence. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that we have a culture of fear in America that is uniquely special to America. Where I don't know if you all saw the documentary "Bowling for Columbine" that Michael Moore made. It was sort of about gun violence, but it was a greater expression of how much fear really controls dialogue and debate in America. Where you have the news media, and of course we're all sort of complicit in this, being in the news media, but we have a news media that preys on people's fears and gets people afraid, just like how every time we have a mass shooting, gun sales go up, more people buy more guns, and then we have even more guns in the country, where, just like Omar was saying, if people have greater access to guns and the more guns there are in the country, gun violence will tend to go up.
It doesn't. Okay, you're saying it's more of a discursive thing. It's more of a cultural thing. It's more about discourse, the norm. Here in the United States, it's a right to bear arms, and you're saying that's part of the problem, is that we have this culture of guns, correct?
We have a culture of guns, yes. We also have a culture of fear, which a culture of guns and a culture of fear doesn't mix well and leads to a lot of violence.
Okay, to me, I hear too many guns, and I'm going to get to Grant here in a second. I hear too many guns, but it seems the problem was only one gun, the gun that the shooter had here in the case of Oregon. Also, when you say a culture of fear, who's afraid? I mean, when you say fear, you're saying we're all afraid?
Everybody. Think about all the, every time, like Aurora, Colorado, gun sales went up then. After the shooting in Arizona, gun sales went up then. After Virginia Tech, gun sales went up then. Everybody thinks, it could happen.
Yeah,
it could be like, it could happen to me. Well, that's fear, right? People are afraid that someone's going to take their guns.
Of the government, not necessarily a shooter. Okay, let me.
Hey, can I jump in for 1 second, because Robert said something and I have something on it. He said that if we have more guns, we're going to have more. Did you say more gun violence, or did you say more homicides? What did you say, Robert?
More guns will lead to more gun violence.
Well, that's obvious, and this is something that is used, I think, a lot in the media, which is it's one of those things that, yeah, if you have more of anything, you're going to have more of violence related to that object, but it doesn't mean that more guns means more homicide. And I think that's a really kind of a tricky thing that's used to portray the amount of guns as being a factor in the amount of violence. And in fact, what I want to show you is, I hope you guys can see this. Does that show up?
Yes.
Okay. What that's showing is the countries with the most firearms tend to have the fewest homicides, and the countries with the most homicides tend to have the fewest firearms. So,
is there any explanation as to why that is, Kevin?
Well, the explanation in my mind is that firearms do not cause homicides. If I was a prosecutor and I was trying to prosecute somebody, and they asked me, all right, and I said his motive for killing somebody, his motive was because he had a firearm, I would be disbarred. Firearms are not a motive for violence. Firearms do not cause violence. There's something deeper. There's a bigger issue.
So there's something to Robert's point about a culture of fear, then, right?
Well, there's a cultural impact, socioeconomic problems. There's a lot of things that lead to violence and homicides. Guns aren't one of them. And this right here is proof. And I've looked at these numbers over and over and over again, and it just does not bear out that more firearms leads to more homicides. It leads to more firearm homicides. Of course it does, but it doesn't lead to more homicides.
Okay.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think.
And I've looked at and I'm sorry, one more thing. And I've looked at, I've run a regression on this, and there is no correlation. In fact, the only correlation there is that the more guns there are, the fewer homicides there are, as in the country.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, Matty. Let me get Omar in here to defend himself. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, yeah, guns don't cause murder. I guess the intelligent liberal argument would be it makes it easier to commit murder. But of course, on the other side, maybe someone like Kevin who's old and defenseless might need a gun to defend himself, so it also makes it easier to defend yourself. So it counterbalances itself.
Did murder exist before firearms?
No.
Okay, nobody was ever murdered before firearms. Got it. Omar, do you want to rebut what Kevin just said? He said that the more firearms per 10,000 people, Kevin?
Well, no, essentially, the more firearms that a country has no impact on the amount of homicides in the country.
Okay, so
firearms and homicides are not correlated, and the little correlation that there is actually a downward sloping correlation, meaning that the more firearms there are in a country, the fewer homicides there are.
Right. So to the point of too many guns, it doesn't seem that bears out with the numbers. Do you have a rebuttal to that, Omar?
I mean, I haven't seen those numbers. I don't know how he got them, but
Okay.
My opinion would be that he's probably looking at all countries in the world and not just developed countries, advanced countries. I mean, you can't compare us to, Somalia,
Mm-hmm.
But if you grab all the developed countries in the world and you look at them and you look at which ones have the most guns and which ones have the most violence and homicides, I'm sure the U.S. is right up there.
That's a good point, Kevin. Can you answer that?
Actually, if you look at homicide rates just purely, and you don't look at firearms or anything else, the United States is in the lower half of all nations in terms of our homicide rate, and the nations that have higher homicide rates have fewer guns. I mean, you can say, my point isn't that, okay, if you only look at one type of country, industrialized country and so forth. Well, my point is that guns are not the reason that there's homicides. There are other reasons, and the fact that you're pointing out that we have to look at industrialized versus third world countries should show you that there's a different reason for violence.
Right.
Why are the murder rates so high in third world countries?
Grant, I'm going to get you in a second. Let Omar respond, and then I'm going to get Grant.
I mean, there are many separate reasons and variables why violence rates are different across different countries, but we can't ignore the fact that the easy access that we have to guns in this country means you get mad at your girlfriend, you get into a fight, boom, you go into your dad's room, he's got 15 guns there. I come from Mexico. In Mexico, we have way more violence than in the United States. Don't get me wrong. I'd rather live in the United States. We have less homicides, less violence. But you can't just go into your dad's. You can't just go to the store and buy an AR-15 like you can in the United States.
I went to a gun show in Mississippi, and I walked out with a 40 caliber Smith & Wesson in like 15 minutes. Like, no joke. It was so easy to buy a gun.
Grant, hold on, Matt, hold on.
Grant, so I'm gonna address this issue about background checks because it's a very huge misconception. First of all, in the United States, we have what's called the National Instant Background Check System, where basically it's run by the ATF. Every state has it.
Federal. It's federal.
You run it themselves, or they run it through the ATF. Every gun I've ever bought, I bought guns in 3 different states, and I can say for a fact that they all ask you if you've ever been adjudicated for mental illness,
federal,
if you've ever been voluntarily committed. And when like Omar brought up universal background checks, and that is a novel idea, but what he's referring to is basically a NICS background check on a private transfer of firearms. Like if you buy your brother a gun for Christmas, and okay, that sounds great, but and just pulling some statistics from the Bureau of Justice here, in 2004, less than 2% of state prison inmates possessing a gun upon the time they were arrested obtained it from a flea market or a gun show, meaning a private transfer, and only about 11% of them inherited it or somehow received it from a family member. And those are essentially things that would be covered under this under a private transfer background check. So while it is a novel idea, it doesn't necessarily mean it would significantly reduce firearm violence overall. And I think the reason is because most gun violence in this country, despite what's plastered all over the media, is in fact from drug disputes, like drug distribution crime, which I mean is a whole other issue entirely. But I think focusing on it as an issue of you might die if you go to school is completely misguided. And to what we were saying earlier about how do you stop mass shootings, I've taken numerous firearms courses, and every single instructor I've ever had all says the same thing, that if you face a threat, the only way to stop it is at the point of attack. They will plan and plot and try to get you whenever you're not looking, whether it's at school or a movie theater or whatever it might be. Up until that point, there's nothing you can do about it. the only time you can stop them if someone really wants to kill you is at the point of attack. And with that in mind, I personally support training and arming teachers, not or just at least armed security guards. I think this whole gun-free zone thing needs to get tossed out the window entirely. I'm not saying that we should just have people running around our schools with guns. It should definitely be controlled, but I don't think the idea of universal background check, it's well intended and it's got a really good motive, but ultimately I don't think it would be effective.
Okay, let me follow up with Grant, then I'll get Carl in here. Grant, ATF, you said ATF has, did you say there were background checks?
Yeah, it's called a National Instant Check System, and basically every retail transfer goes through this, every single one.
So it's a federal background check, correct?
If Carl went to his gun show and bought it from a retailer who just had a table there, just because he's at a gun show doesn't mean he's void of a background check.
Right, so that's at the federal level, correct? That's the federal level. That's what I want to. Okay. So that's what we were talking about earlier with Omar. He said he wanted a federal background check, and it seems that we already have one. Grant, do you know if there's any states that don't require a background check?
So it varies. In Pennsylvania, for example, and I'm only speaking to this state because I know their law really well. You have to do private background checks for handgun transfers, but not for rifle transfers. I think it's 34 states require some kind of background check for private transfers. I might be wrong though. It might be 28. It's something around that area. But it's I mean every state's different. But retail transfers, every state does a background check every single time.
All right, Carl. Do you want to answer that to Grant's points, and then I'll get Mike and Matt in here.
Yeah, I remember. My experience buying a gun in Mississippi back in 2011. I don't know if the laws have changed since then. I paid for it in cash, went to a gun show, and I'd actually just driven by the Trade Mart and noticed that there was a gun show going on. I drove in, I walked around, was looking for just something to go target shooting with. I saw a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson. I didn't fill out any paperwork. I showed someone my Mississippi driver's license. They took it. They were on the phone for like 5 minutes, and then I paid cash for the gun. I bought a box of ammo, and I cleaned the gun and shot it that afternoon. I mean, it seemed like it was a really short process to get that gun. It seemed like I should have had to fill out some paperwork or something.
Go ahead, Grant.
When they were on the phone for 5 minutes, they were running a national instant check system. That's how they do it. They call and they just read your number. And again, every state is different with their paperwork. Mississippi, they may just take your driver's license and read it off to the person on the other end. But at the end of the day, I mean, unless you give them a fake ID or whatever. But
so like they ran his name.
It's still a very small percentage of people who get convicted of crimes who buy a gun that would be covered by universal.
So they ran his name. The ATF ran his name when he bought that gun and did a background check.
He runs his name that's held in a federal database, and it actually is even an international database.
Okay. Let me get Mike in here. Mike, on guns, we were just talking about. To the points, the ones that were rebutted, there were too many guns in it, but the data shows, well, Kevin's data shows that countries with more guns tend to have fewer homicides. It seems.
Do suicides count as homicides in there? Because I know like a lot of the gun deaths are suicides in America.
No, the homicides are classified differently than suicides.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you gun deaths, yes, suicides are included, but homicide is another form of. It means it from someone else other than yourself, whereas suicide is yourself.
I know the gun-related suicide rate in the United States is abnormally high.
Yeah, I think it's 20,000 a year, 21,000 a year.
Yeah.
And there's 31,000 gun deaths per year.
Now Japan has an even worse suicide problem, and they have basically no firearms.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a question for you guys.
Go ahead, Omar.
So you guys are
libertarian
free market guys. How about just forcing every single gun owner to have insurance on his gun? What do you guys think about that? So that way they might be more careful with it, might not leave it lying around, so your 10-year-old picks it up and shoots his 12-year-old, like happened in the picnic yesterday. If somebody gets killed with your gun, there's an insurance payout. Do you guys think that's a free market solution to this? That could maybe...
They already have that.
Well, that
already exists.
Yeah, but is it mandatory?
I don't think it's mandatory. I think it certainly could incentivize some people to behave, I don't know, more responsibly with firearms. Although, like, if you look at the statistics of how many accidental deaths there are from firearms each year, I think it's like around 500, which obviously it's 500 too many, but the amount of people who die every year falling out of bed is also around 500. So, I mean, I think the actual amount you'd have to pay to insurance would be so small just because the probability of that happening is very small. So I'm not sure what kind of effect it would have.
So you're saying
let me
But
get in on this one here.
if you're a 21-year-old with a bad record, so maybe your insurance will cost more than a 50-year-old with a squeaky clean record. Maybe,
do you mean bad record like criminal record? Because I mean, I honestly don't think anyone who's a criminal record should own a gun or be able to. So.
Well, a lot of people with criminal records can own guns as long as they're not felons.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Look, I'm not understanding this idea correct, but requiring insurance on a gun would actually have a reverse incentive for people. If you look at no-fault states where insurance is required on vehicles, and there's no fault at all, people actually drive worse because they don't have an incentive to drive safely because they're required to have insurance, and insurance pays for that.
So I don't know hazard problem.
What's that?
A moral hazard problem.
Yeah, it's a moral hazard. There's anybody that's irresponsible with a gun can be sued. That's already possible. If you require them to have insurance, insurance would cover them being sued. So it would actually have an incentive to have bad behavior if you require that. It wouldn't incentivize good behavior at all. That would actually cause a bigger problem.
It's a good point.
Yeah, the law already adds costs to careless behavior with a weapon.
And I just want to jump in really quick and say something to the insurance policy thing. There's actually kind of like a free market solution that has evolved out of gun laws to protect gun owners. I have one myself. It's called an NFA gun trust. It's meant so you can basically buy what's known as NFA items or various different special kinds of firearms. And what I've done is just transfer all of them into this trust. It's essentially a corporation. So, like, let's say someone breaks into my house, steals one of my guns, and then goes shoots up a school. I'm not legally liable for whatever happens. So if someone tries to sue me, they can only sue me for the value of the corporation, which would only be the guns that are in the corporation. So they would see that and be like, "This is pointless. Why would I sue this person?"
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, I think we should move on to another subject.
We're going to move on here now. Give me a second. I want to give you the format. We're going to move on to minimum wage. We're going to get into economics. I know the viewers want to see this, and we talked to Carl about this the last time he was on the show. I'm gonna get Omar and Carl's opinion on minimum wage, and then I'll let you guys respond one at a time. Omar, minimum wage, a living wage. Tell me how this helps lessen inequality and how this helps people on the in the lower income brackets, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it certainly helps. It certainly helps them catch up with inflation that already occurred. So the minimum wage doesn't actually cause inflation. It actually is raised to catch up with already naturally occurring inflation in the economy. Now, of course, naturally, if you lift the wage floor, not just minimum wage workers. I mean, there's only 2 or 3 minimum wage workers in America, but there's about 50 million workers making $2 only, within $2 of the minimum wage. So, of course, if you lift the wage floor for all workers, they have more money in their pockets. They have more money to spend.
Let me just challenge you there on that point of inflation. I don't know if anybody ever claimed that minimum wage causes inflation, and I think setting a minimum wage by through legislation actually makes it more susceptible to inflation. Inflation is exogenous of minimum wage, so if you set it at $10, inflation may actually surpass whatever the minimum, so it makes that problem worse.
Yeah, but the minimum wage is never going to be high enough so that it creates inflation. That's just silly.
No. I don't think anyone ever made that claim. No one on this panel or anyone I know has made the claim that minimum wage causes inflation. I'm saying that if you legislate and you create and you set in stone a minimum wage, that it's susceptible to inflation, that it won't adjust with natural market mechanisms.
I think that was his point too, though.
Was it?
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing I was saying, but the minimum wage, I mean, I studied labor law at Cornell University, so I know a little bit about labor before the minimum wage laws. And there was people that were working for $2, $3 an hour. You had the company store, etc. So you could say, well, if you set the minimum wage at $2 an hour, then we'll have full employment. That's what dumbass Michelle Bachmann said. Yeah, but then you have people your neighbors are working for $2 an hour. They're working full time. They're living in poverty. You're never going to know peace if your neighbors are working full time.
Okay, back to the issue. So you're saying it's bad because of inflation, or it's good protection against it? Because I was saying it was bad as a protection against inflation, that it doesn't cause it. No, are you saying it's good as a protection against inflation? I'm confused.
I'm not really sure what your point is, but
Okay.
the minimum wage is raised in order to catch up with already occurring inflation. So the minimum wage, so that the workers that are getting paid at the lowest end of the scale can have enough money to eat without being forced to rely on government assistance, such as Medicaid and food stamps. What you have right now is Walmart is paying $8 an hour when their workers need $10 an hour to live. So what they're doing is they're literally holding seminars where they're teaching their employees how to sign up for government assistance. And you guys as libertarians, you guys should be against all kinds of corporate welfare. I mean, this is exactly what you guys are against, government waste. So Walmart, in essence, is cheating the taxpayers out of $2 for every hour that their employees make. So if you were to raise the minimum wage, you'd have less workers relying on government assistance. So you'd actually have less government.
That's absolutely not true. I mean, a worker who's laid off is gonna lean more on government assistance than a worker who is working for a minimum wage.
Now you're making the assumption that they're going to be laid off.
Okay, well let me show you this.
Hold on, Omar. Give him a second, and then I'll get
this right here is what happens when you raise the minimum wage to the labor participation rate for teenagers. These are the people most, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
These are the people most susceptible to being laid off when the minimum wage is raised. Now, every red dot is where they raised the minimum wage. Look what happened. People left the labor market because they could not get jobs because people would stop hiring at those levels.
That's just not true. I mean,
it is true. That's from the federal government.
Hold on, give him a second.
From the government.
Kevin, give him a second.
Government statistics.
Kevin, give him a second to rebut you. Go ahead.
On Rogue.
And then I'll get Carl in here.
You know, he's a statistic analysis over here, but you know, regression. This is just a regression analysis. You can create one of those with anything and make it prove anything.
That's not a regression. That's an absolute. That's just
the number.
That is just all I did was show the chart of the labor participation.
I mean, there's
teenagers, and every time the minimum wage is raised, the labor participation rate plummets.
Okay.
So those are the people who help with the minimum wage.
The labor if I jump in.
Hold on a second. Let me get Carl in here. Let me get Carl in, and then I'll get to you.
I'm gonna get my charger, guys. I'll be back.
Okay. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. And again, thanks y'all for having me.
No, thank you for coming back. I really appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it's a matter of morality, where if you have someone who's working a full-time job, working full-time hours, they need to be able to pay basic living expenses and, you know, live in dignity. And that's not happening for a lot of workers. You know, the wage has been frozen at $7.25 for since 2006, for almost a decade now. And you have the federal minimum wage for tipped workers. It's at $2.13 an hour. Now, I would be in favor of, if we were to incrementally raise the minimum wage for and scale it out for big businesses versus small businesses as to when the minimum wage gets implemented. But I would love to see that minimum wage be raised to a point where the average cost of living, taking in costs of rent, transportation, food for a given community, where a living wage is established for each state based on those data points. I would love to see 15 an hour nationally. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. I know for a lot of states it's different.
Why
15
not
an hour won't get you it. It should be 21 an hour if it kept up with worker productivity.
But yeah, okay. To that point, why not
that.
31? Why? What? How do you set that limit? Is it the way that you feel it should be? Is it like? I mean, because cost of living is different everywhere. $21 an hour in Manhattan is nothing.
Right. So I mean, and
it
should be based on the community that it's in. It should be based on what the cost of living is. Because like you said, 15 an hour in Manhattan or San Francisco won't get you very far.
Right.
Every single part of Los Angeles is actually unaffordable on $15 an hour right now, and they're going to phase it in by 2020. So I mean, it's got to be based on the community that it's in. But I think there needs to be a serious effort to make sure that people who are working full time can afford to get by. I don't think that's a radical thing to say.
Okay, Mike, can you respond? Go ahead, Matt. I'll get you next.
All right.
I don't want to jump up the debate. I'll let Matt respond to Carl. I want to touch on what Omar said.
Okay, I'll get to you to rebut Omar later. Go ahead on Omar, and then I'll get to Matt. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, Omar just brought up one of the points, and he brought up libertarians should be against all corporate welfare, and he brought up that when you don't make a minimum wage, we actively subsidize Walmart because they receive welfare. So it's a subsidy to a corporation. And I've always hated this argument because the implication is here that it's actually the corporation, such as Walmart, who, by the way, pays higher than minimum wage, but it's actually
like
the corporation
60 cents an hour higher.
Fair
Anyway,
enough.
go ahead.
Maybe depending on where you're at.
Right.
But the implication of that argument is that it's the corporation or Walmart that benefits from government welfare programs. So my question to Omar would be, are you in favor of eliminating government welfare programs? Because by your logic, that means that if you did that, Walmart would be forced to pay higher wages, or would it not work that way?
I mean, they're cheating the system. I mean, these government welfare programs are called the social safety net. You know, you have food stamps for hungry children and seniors, working Americans. You have Medicaid for people who can't afford medication. So you need these things. You can't have people walking around without food in their stomachs. Little babies going to sleep hungry, seniors going to sleep hungry, people dying on the streets with lack of medical care.
So the beneficiary of the programs are the people, right? The beneficiaries of welfare programs are individual people or employees, correct?
A lot of them are, not all of them.
So how does Walmart or any corporation benefit from payments to their employees? They don't benefit at all. How do they benefit? They
benefit relative to their employees. Let's say you're Walmart's competitor and you have a heart and you don't want to rip off the system and rip off taxpayers and you don't want to pay poverty wages. You want to pay closer to a living wage, $1.50 more. You're at a competitive disadvantage because your competitor is ripping off taxpayers, paying their employees less, and charging lower prices. So you're not just cheating the entire system; you're cheating against your competitors as well.
But hold on a second. Hold on. Why would anybody want to work for Walmart when the competitor is paying more? Wouldn't they all leave and go work for the competitor?
A lot of them do, but a lot of them are just not skilled enough. You guys always make this argument. Hey, if you're not skilled enough, just go to college and better yourself. Not everybody can. I grew up.
I don't know anyone who's made that argument here about you. But let me go to Carl. Carl wanted to go ahead. Carl, get in there, and then let me get to Matt to talk about your last claim. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go ahead and point this out. Major U.S. corporations. This came out just a few years ago. S&P 500 companies made an average of $420,000 in revenue per employee in 2010. Corporate profits have been hitting new record highs every quarter. So why is it that these major profitable corporations like Walmart, Apple, Target, billion-dollar companies can't afford to pay employees more than $7 in a quarter? I mean, it just seemed like if profits are going up, that means your workers are working harder, they deserve more of a wage, and they have the money to pay them.
Maddie, go ahead.
All right.
What do you say to that?
So as you guys can see, I have a lot of disjointed notes, so I'm kind of going to bounce around topics a bit here, but they're all on minimum wage. So Carl, you brought up the stat that if you index minimum wage productivity, it would be 21 an hour, and I've heard that claim from Elizabeth Warren, so I'm assuming you guys are referring to whatever paper she took it from. And I have a piece on Rare that I published about that probably about a year ago, and what she was looking at was overall productivity in the economy. So when you have sectors like finance or technology that have had productivity increases well above average, that gets factored in. So what I did was I looked at productivity only in like the fast food sector, and that's been actually relatively constant since the 80s. And you can even look at unit labor costs and see that they're increasing, meaning that wages are actually rising faster than productivity. And I tracked that since 1987.
Productivity is just one metric. You could index it to the rate of increase in executive pay, for example.
I don't know why you'd want to do that, though, because obviously, see, like if you look at, for instance, if you look at CEO pay over time, the reason it's increased is because the market capitalization of companies on average has increased. But, a McDonald's worker isn't really contributing as much to the company as the CEO, surely you would think, right?
So are you saying that because a CEO's one decision could lose billions of dollars, that's the reason why they're compensated so much more than, say, somebody who works behind the counter who makes a mistake and it costs relatively nothing?
Well, I mean, my point was, like, if you look at CEO pay from, I think it's like the 80s today, it went from, at S&P 500 companies, like 30 to 1 to 300 to 1 or something like that. But if you look at the market capitalization, the value of companies in the S&P, it's 10 times higher than it was back then.
So let me ask Matt. Let me follow up. Let me ask. It's like saying that the guy who cleans up in Cleveland, the janitor at the Cleveland, the basketball arena. That's like saying that they should be paid the same amount as, say, LeBron James. That a mistake that LeBron James makes in the finals could cost the team as much money as a mistake
not at all. Well, I mean, obviously, CEOs have more of a responsibility to keep the company afloat than somebody working part-time at a cash register.
Yeah, right.
But aside from that, the larger point that I was making is that if there's such a disparity in pay between the average worker and the executive, and this is true across fast food, retail, finance, technology, the disparity is 180 to 350 times more. I mean, in most other developed countries, most other OECD countries, I think the highest disparity is like 23 to 1.
It's not.
Right,
The
go ahead,
actual disparity is
Hold on, let's get Kevin,
3.5
and
to 1.
then you can rebut. Go ahead, Kevin.
The actual disparity is 3.5 to 1. Because when people say it's 180, it's 400 to 1, and so forth, they're not including every CEO. They're only including the peak, the pinnacle, the Fortune 500 CEOs versus every worker in America. You're talking about 500 people versus every worker. You know how many CEOs there are? There's like 100,000 CEOs in America. And if you look at their average pay, it's 3.5 times what the average worker makes.
Okay, so
I have more to say about minimum wage, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, Matt. Then let me get Omar and Carl back in here. Go ahead.
All right, cool. So, Carl, you also made the argument. I've heard actually, I think Obama and Sanders make it. The no full-time workers should have to live in poverty. And I actually have a piece coming out on fee on this soon. And I looked at the stats on what percentage of full-time workers actually do live in poverty. And it's actually only about 2.7% last year, compared to something like 15% for all workers. So, for the most part, most full-time workers aren't living in poverty. And even for those who are classified in poverty, they're obviously eligible for government benefits that may push them over that line in terms of total compensation. It might not show up in the statistics, but they're getting pushed over the line. I think the stat from the Heartland Institute was that if you have like a single mother on minimum wage with one child, when you factor in the value of the earned income tax credit, she would make something like either $10.25 or $10.50 an hour. With that subsidy included, and that of course doesn't include any other benefits she might get, like Medicaid, and SNAP, etc. So I'm not sure if anyone working full time necessarily is living in poverty.
Well, there's also a huge shortage of full-time jobs. For every full-time job opening in America, I think there's like 4 or 5 people seeking. And the actual unemployment rate when you calculate people working part-time who want to work full-time, the underemployed, Bernie Sanders pointed out it's over 10%.
Yes,
so, I mean, I think there needs to be a greater push for not just more jobs, but more full-time, good-paying jobs.
But I guess my talking point is it's not a wage problem; it's a job problem or an hour problem.
Right.
And I worry that because I actually if you look at the poverty rate for workers in general, part-time or full-time, it's 7%, which is still half of the overall poverty rate. So, I mean, one of my concerns with the minimum wage is, well, I don't want to put anyone out of work because they're twice as likely to be impoverished then.
Right. Now, let me get to Omar. Carl brought up a point. I'm sorry, Grant. Go ahead.
Well, all right. I was just going to say to this point, because I do agree with Carl that it's a job problem, but I think the job problem is caused by, as what Omar said, not everyone can or should go to college, and he's completely right about that. And as someone who works in the manufacturing business, and I've seen the stats on it, we struggle to find talent, like quality CNC operators and programmers. And I think I saw in the Wall Street Journal that there's like 600,000 jobs that need to be filled in manufacturing. And these are all good-paying jobs. And we pay people $28, $30 an hour. And our apprenticeship program is basically non-existent now because we have all these kids who went to like liberal arts schools and got degrees in like Japanese American history or something like that when they could have been going to trade schools. And like Omar said, he had a lot of debt coming out of college, and I can see why that's a problem. But it's a mindset of, well, if you're poor, go to college. It's your only option than trade school. And I think we push that narrative a lot in the mainstream, and it's panned out in federal student loan programs, and it's caused a lot of problems.
Okay. So back to that, Omar. Carl said it's a jobs problem. Grant just described some of the jobs problem. If we need, people are making declarative statements. Yeah, we need more jobs. It's a jobs problem. We need more full-time jobs. Where do these jobs come from? Is it just should the government assign people to certain tasks?
Absolutely, they should. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I'll let Omar take this.
Okay. So the government should actually ascribe people to do certain tasks. Would you agree with that, Omar?
I mean, whenever there's a slump in the economy, it's not just a Democratic or a Republican thing. I mean, America has built-in stabilizers into the economy where the government should step in and pick up the slack. Now, can the government be expected to pick up all the slack? Absolutely not.
How though? When you say pick up the slack, how is the government picking up the slack? By making interest rates zero? Monetary stimulation like we have now?
Well, we do monetary stimulation. Also, I mean, in the 30s, we had the government created an entire works program that helped out, that built the entire middle class. We could do a lot more. The stimulus package was great. It just wasn't big enough. It was way.
It was mostly tax breaks.
It was half of it was tax cuts. Yeah, half of it was tax cuts.
So So would you say raising taxes would actually help the economy?
Absolutely.
Well, it depends on which tax rates you raise. I mean, if you raise tax rates on the top, of course, because if you raise the corporate tax rate, and even better than that, I mean, raising the corporate tax rate would help. It wouldn't help that much. If you repatriate all the money that is being hidden in offshore accounts by corporations and billionaires and bring that money back to America and tax it, we'll have plenty of money. To take care of our people back home and to pay for the little bit of social safety nets that
when
we have.
When you say we, you mean like me and you, the people?
The U.S. government. The US government.
So the U.S. government takes people's money and then we use it, like me and you.
We don't take anybody's money. We take.
It's not theirs. It's not their money.
It's a civilized society where we're not monkeys living in the middle of the jungle.
Okay, so
we pay taxes.
No, true. To my next question, what percentage, like at corporate tax rate, 50, 60% of their money that they owe in taxes? Or?
Well, right now, I mean, the corporate tax rate is about, I believe, 39. No, that's the corporate tax rate is about 20 in this country.
Right.
It depends on which.
It's higher than that. Actually.
Depends how big of a corporation you are. It can go from 20 to 26. The highest income rate is about 39%.
What would be suitable for, let's say you? What's suitable tax for half of what a corporation earns on top of?
I think tax rates are fine the way they are now if they were enforced, but they're not strictly enforced. Okay. Corporations like Apple are grabbing all their money and sticking it offshore, so they're paying an effective tax rate of less than 10%.
Why are jobs leaving America?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Why are jobs leaving America?
I mean, a lot of jobs in the manufacturing sector have left America. A lot of jobs are being created in America.
Do you think raising corporate taxes will lure jobs back?
I don't think it will lure jobs back. I just said I wouldn't favor raising corporate tax rates. I think they're high enough. I would say actually enforcing them, which means actually taxing all the money and not allowing.
Enforcing them, though, would raise the cost, you see. The reason that they stay here is because they can't hide. So if you enforce them, it raises the cost.
No,
you have less jobs.
Corporations stay in this country because we're the best country in the world to do business. So they leave their corporate headquarters here, and then they do their banking in Switzerland and in the Cayman Islands, and they do their manufacturing in China.
Right. Do you think that helps? Does that help anybody, or is that harms Americans that they buy things at a lower cost because they're able to do things overseas? I mean, doesn't that raise the standard of living? Why should I have to subsidize everyone else when I pay for my
goods? It does. There are winners. There's winners and there's losers, to every system. I mean, yeah, you're helping. There's winners in China. There's people in China that are gaining jobs. There's winners here because we're able to buy low-cost products at Walmart.
But who buys the most low-cost products? Is it the rich people?
Poor people. No,
okay,
poor people.
So it helps.
It helps.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Carl,
there's winners and losers in everything. I mean, look at Mexico. Walmart came into Mexico. It destroyed the entire local economy. But yes, poor people in Mexico are now able to go to Walmart and buy a radio for $5.
Right.
So in many ways, they are helped.
No, I know. I mean, isn't that the goal here? Is to help the poor, the most disadvantaged among us? I think that's the thing that we are all really seeking to do here, and it seems as though a lower tax rate would help that.
But you're doing a race to the bottom for product costs, but what that leads to is also to a race to the bottom in wages and in standard of quality, standard of living.
Wages are relative to prices. You can't just make, wages aren't just nominal. There's real wages and how it,
If everything was free and I made $1 an hour, I'd be the richest person in the world.
Only Karl Marx thought that wages were absolute. I think that was debunked a long time ago. Forgive me for getting into economic history here. Karl, speak to that. We're talking about jobs. Omar says it's the problem of we're not taking enough. Our corporate tax rates aren't high. There's too much money overseas. How would seizing more of that money affect jobs and bring more full-time jobs here? That's where I'm lost on the economics of that, empirically speaking.
Yeah. So one thing that Bernie Sanders has proposed is a jobs program, national jobs program, similar to the Works Progress Administration of the 1930s that Omar was talking about. And doing that by
maybe this time we could get rid of those racist policies they had, like they had in the 1930s in the FHA.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Let's hope so.
I hope we do. But yeah, I think one thing that Omar mentioned makes a lot of sense is the fact that Apple, Google, a lot of these major corporations, some of the most profitable companies in the world, stash billions of dollars overseas. There was huge news this week from Reuters that major corporations have $2.1 trillion stashed overseas. If that $2.1 trillion were repatriated back to the United States, taxed at the 35% rate, that would be hundreds of billions of dollars, which we could then use to fund, jobs that pay, say,
what jobs, Carl?
$50,000 a year.
Specific jobs. Give me a specific what job.
You want to improve dams, you want to improve levees, you want to improve public transportation, you want to have nationwide broadband, you want to have a high-speed rail system that goes everywhere. I mean, there's no shortage of jobs that we could put people to work in America.
Why did they stash that money overseas? Why don't they? I mean, what is it doing overseas?
Because they're greedy.
What is their motivation for keeping money overseas?
Go ahead, Omar. Go ahead.
Because they're just greedy. I mean, I run a corporation. I have another very successful corporation aside from politics, and of course, I'm going to do everything in my power to save every single dollar. And you're just greedy. You're a corporation. All you're thinking about is your bottom line.
It's greedy that they want to keep the money that they earn, but it's not
greedy.
That you want the government to take it from them. What is greed?
You phrase paying for the society that takes care of your that protects your property, that puts you out when you have a fire, that has roads where you truck your goods, that has a customer base that buys your goods. You view like paying the taxes to support that infrastructure as seizing money, which I think is a really unfair depiction. I don't think anyone
North Korea has all those things.
Hold a gun to someone's head and take their money. But I think what we should do is say you're making a lot of money off of this infrastructure, and you should pay to support it. I think
what's going to happen if you do that? Are they going to stay? Are they going to stay or go?
Hold on one second here, Kevin. I'm going to get to you. Go ahead, Maddie, and then let me get to Kevin.
Well, I mean, they do pay for those things with the taxes they do pay. Actually, Carl, I wanted to ask, would you support, let's say, like a tax holiday on bringing corporate profits back? Let's say maybe corporations pay 10%, would bring it back.
Nope.
Wouldn't we ever to have? Let's say,
the point is not to bring money back. The point is to punish greed, Matt.
No, the point is to not enable the point is to not enable people skirting the tax system.
Okay,
I pay 35% rate.
Why not get some money at 10% instead of none at 35%? I think shareholders would like that too, because you can.
I'm sure shareholders would. I mean, the richest.
Well, about the shareholders.
Well, I care about the shareholders because all this money overseas is not producing a return, and it could be producing a return. It's good for the company if they could use the money.
Third parties that have no interest in the company should dictate what happens to the money, not shareholders, Matt.
In 2004, President Bush signed a bill into law called the American Jobs Act that did just the thing that you're describing, Matt. What happened when the money was repatriated at a 5% rate instead of 35%? HP bought up shares of its own stock, fired tens of thousands of workers. Merck did the same thing. Pharmaceutical tech companies all did this, and they fired workers after saying it would create jobs. It's pure greed. I mean, that's the motivation, like Omar said.
Go ahead, Grant. Go, Grant.
Yeah, okay, so we keep talking about these like corporations, and it sounds very ambiguous to me. And you're bringing up these examples like Merck, Apple, Walmart, all these companies, right? And it seems to me that you've essentially listed like 3 companies, a dozen companies in an economy that's got, I mean, hundreds of thousands of businesses, millions maybe even, of all different sizes. And the problem is when you just say ambiguously raise taxes on corporations, it's not like the government's just going to be like, oh, okay, only if you're so big we'll tax you this much, or only if you're this corporation. And when you want to impose these rules, and maybe you are right that yes, companies avoid taxes by putting their money overseas, but the problem is that mom and pop businesses cannot do that. They cannot afford that. And
mom
when
and pop
impose
businesses
these policies, it's going to affect them arbitrarily.
Okay, hold on a second, guys.
Can I jump in here?
And if you look at a really good study by the Small Business Administration, they found that outright any kind of taxation and regulation is like 10 times more costly to a small business than it is to a big corporation. So I would tread lightly in the idea of, well, let's just tax corporations. Because as Omar said, he has his corporation, and if you're going to raise taxes on corporations, he's going to get hit just as hard as Walmart, but Walmart has the resources to avoid all of that.
That's the exact problem with our tax system.
Why not make it less for everybody?
Can I ask
Small
Carl
businesses don't.
Carl, I want to pitch you my corporate tax plan, and I think you'll agree with it.
Okay.
Right, Walmart and McDonald's, they pay 100% taxes. Costco and Shake Shack pay 0. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. It's not fair.
No, you wouldn't agree with that? Okay, I thought it was your companies, so I thought maybe you'd like that.
No, here's the thing, though. In all seriousness, and I'll be brief.
Yeah.
we have a tax system that's put in place specifically because major corporations have more lobbying clout, can hire more lawyers to send to Washington to rid the tax code in their favor than small mom and pop businesses do. If anything, we need a tax system that's a lot more favorable to small businesses, and that's much more stringent on major corporations like Apple.
Right. I mean, I completely agree with that. Just to touch on something we were talking about earlier about like the tax holiday, and you're talking about like HP and stuff, how they cut jobs after getting those, well, basically a tax break. I mean, if they're cutting jobs after a tax break, wouldn't they have just cut them anyway? It's just like they're cutting jobs after they have more money, so if they had less money, wouldn't they just be cutting them anyway?
They did it all to drive up their stock price. What they did was, and it's a 1-2 punch of both buying up shares of their own stock and then firing workers. So the labor cost is reduced. The share price is increased because there are fewer shares on the market. So, I mean, it's really just a move to increase the value of the options owned by the executives. That's the whole reason they did that.
I see. Okay.
See, all right, so here's, and I'll be brief on this. My issue is that you're talking about using the government for plunder, right? You're saying that you want the government to go into these businesses, take money, and redistribute it to help everybody else. The problem is when you do that, the people that you're going to plunder are going to understandably take interest in what you're doing to their business. And at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever they can to make that a smaller amount, to the point where it becomes an investment for them. It becomes a cost of doing business, a cost that Walmart can afford, and a cost that a small mom and pop business cannot afford. So regardless of who you tax or how much you tax, if you're talking about increasing taxes on business, big business will always benefit from that, because they will always say, okay, make the tax code bigger, make it more complicated, try to close loopholes, fine. They'll always have people in Washington trying to manipulate that to their advantage, and it will come at the expense of people who cannot invest in lives.
Well, and go ahead.
You go ahead, Carl. I talked enough.
Yeah. Well, to address that point, you need to, along with addressing the tax code, because we all know these are all just pie-in-the-sky ideas that Congress would never pass, ever, because big money runs Washington. It's, I think the main problem that I would love to hear us all talk about at some point, even though it's past 9 o'clock, is what are we going to do about the influence of big money in Washington? We can't pass any meaningful policy that changes anything, from jobs policy to minimum wage to the environment, tax policy, unless we get rid of the influence that big money has in Washington. I mean, I think all of you would agree that regardless of who you are in society, everyone should have an equal say in how the government is run.
The government needs to be so small that there's no influence for sale.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, that was what I was basically going to say, is I think we're just combating the problem from a different angle. Carl wants to control the money, we want to control the power of government. But, I mean, same goal. And, shit, I'm muting out.
You still there, Matt? I think we lost Matt.
Yeah, we lost Matt.
All right. Well, if you guys can hear me, I have some fact checking I've done here.
Go ahead.
First of all, this claim that corporate profits are an all-time high. This is what that looks like. At the top are worker pay, wages plus benefits. At the bottom are corporate profits. That's what an all-time high looks like. That's what you guys talk about so often when you talk about why can't they increase worker pay and so forth. That's an all-time high. And these are from the census and from the Federal Reserve. These aren't made-up numbers. You can go. I'll hand them out to you after if you'd like. They're really, profits being at an all-time high is fractional. It's barely above what it used to be. In fact, from World War II until now, both profits and worker compensation, what they make in pay and benefits, is basically stable. There hasn't been much change in that. So really, there really isn't a whole lot of, a boom in company profits to somehow give to the workers.
Can you? Well, I mean, it's also true though that inflation-adjusted wages fell about 2% in 2011 and have continued to fall really since the 1970s.
Yeah,
you have the percentage of workers reporting no change in their wages, completely stagnant wages, is at its highest level in 30 years.
Yeah, but you're talking wages. You're saying wages. Yeah, what else do workers make? Is it just
a lot of workers?
Because if you don't have they're being paid more in their health care benefits, which are going through the roof, because the price of health care is going through the roof. So in order for companies to pay their workers, they have to increase the amount of health insurance they provide them with. So the wages stagnate. The wages are stagnating because healthcare prices are going through the roof.
But how many of those workers that are cited in your chart, who are paid wages and benefits? A lot of workers don't have benefits. A lot of workers are at-will employees. A lot of workers don't have
all America.
Those benefits
This chart is all of America combined.
I mean, you know, I don't know what your business is, what you do for a living, what you guys do for a living. I don't have an employer that pays for my health care. If I have to pay for health care, I do it out of pocket, as a lot of other Americans do.
Which means they have to compete for your labor through wages and other forms of compensation. But people that are forced to give you health care compensation, they're seeing their costs go up. So what do? They have to keep their wages stable or even down because they have to pay for your health care, which is going through the roof.
So let me ask you this. Would you agree that it would be better to take the profit motive out of healthcare entirely and just have healthcare be a human right for everybody?
You know what the profit margin in healthcare is?
I don't.
It's like 2%. It's a tiny margin. You take that away, you're not giving anybody anything.
All right. I don't want to. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Carl.
No one could hear me for the longest time when I was trying to moderate.
And it was the best part of the discussion.
No, guys, Carl, you said you don't know what we do for a living. Have you heard of a company called Koch Industries?
I knew it. I knew you guys were involved.
Let me get
Well, Kevin's Monsanto, but the rest of us are all Koch.
Kevin's friends with the Bush family. He lives next door.
They're watching off screen, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, guys, my computer's...
Look, yeah, I think Carl froze.
Ah, damn. I mean, we're going to end the show anyway, but...
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
yeah, Omar had to leave, but that was a good show.
I think so,
That
yeah.
was great.
It's been an hour. I'm sorry, at the end I lost my mic, and I was trying to moderate to get Kevin and Mike in there, and I couldn't. I was starting to get pissed. But anyway, that was a really great show. I want to thank Carl for coming on, and Omar. That was really great of them to come on.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Follow their pages, even though I don't want you to follow their pages. It's U.S. Uncut and Occupy Democrats. We will do this again. Omar already texted me and said he wants to do it again, and I know Carl will definitely do it again. So we'll do this again sometime. Thank you everybody for watching, and follow our pages. Unbiased America. We are capitalists, the modern libertarian, and being classically liberal, as well as being liberal logic. We got Mikey back finally. Hopefully he'll post some stuff to his page. We'll see. Again, for Grant Phillips, Kevin Ryan, Michael Lee, Matt Palumbo, and myself, Will Riccadella, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next week. Have a good night.
See you.